Welcome to The Entrepreneurial Musician with Andrew Hitz, a podcast from the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network featuring interviews with the best and brightest entrepreneurs and innovators in the music business. Today's episode features composer Jim Stephenson. Jim has had his music performed on 5 different continents by ensembles such as the President's Own Marine Band, the Minnesota Orchestra, and the Boston Pops. He talks about his decision to quit his orchestral job to become a full-time composer, the challenges he faces as a self-publisher, and the hilarious story of how he purposely tried to make his first composition terrible and failed. He tells us all about it next. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and before I introduce this week's guest, I would like to ask you that if you've been enjoying the podcast, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to go to the iTunes store and leave a rating, and if you had a minute or two on top of that to leave a short review, it would be super helpful to get other people to find the podcast. But if not, I'm really happy that you are listening. So without further ado, this week's guest is composer, trumpet player, and father, Jim Stephenson. How are you doing tonight, Jim?
Doing fantastic, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's been a feat getting just our 2 schedules lined up, but that's because well, first of all, he's working on 90 commissions right now. I don't think he knows how to say the word no. So, but I was reading up on what you have coming up, and none of them are anything you should say no to. So that's part of the problem, I think. And he's a father of 4, and he's bringing a kid to college, and all I've got is 1 toddler, and that kind of handcuffs me. So we've kind of hit and missed on the. So I really appreciate you taking some time to meet with me and to share some insights for all of us. The first thing that I wanted to do, anyone who listens to the Brass Junkies podcast with Lance LeDuc already knows this story, but this is from the Rex Richardson interview that we did. But Jim and I met, in quotes, when I was at the Chicago Brass Festival. This was a few years ago, and Rex was there, and Rex and I have been good friends for a long time. And Rex and Jim are not only really good friends, but Jim has written a whole bunch of pieces for Rex, and so they have worked very closely together. So they have a very strong relationship. So I go backstage to say hi to Rex after his rehearsal, and he was on his cell phone. So we see each other and we give each other a hug, and then he said, hold on 1 second, and then he handed me the phone, and I then said hello, and Jim here said hello, and then I said who is this? And he said, this is Jim Stephenson. I said, oh, cool. Well, it's nice to kind of meet you. This is Andrew Hitz. And then Rex was like, oh, you cats don't know each other? I swear you knew each other. So it was like a very awkward, he had to put his trumpets down. So he just handed me the phone. So that was, or hopefully this interview will not be that awkward.
No, that was kind of a funny introduction. It was. I like things like that where you don't really know what's going on and you have to figure it out. Yeah, it's kind of like my career, actually, in a nutshell.
There's, as you're all going to hear pretty soon, that he's obviously. I would be surprised if anybody who's listening does not know his story, just his career. He's very well known at this point, but he's got a fascinating path that he took to get there. Which is what I think is so cool. So, speaking of which, can you give us a quick rundown of what your career path?
Well, I'll try to make it quick because it's been 20-something years in the making. But the fact that I'm even talking to you as a composer still kind of blows my mind, because I always thought from day one that I picked up the trumpet that would be my entire life, that I would be playing the trumpet from that day forward, and I'd be 70 years old someday still playing in a symphony. That's what I thought I'd be doing. And so I started out by going to Interlaken for 7 summers, and I threw a summer of Tanglewood in there as well. And then I went to New England Conservatory for college, and this was all with the idea of being a trumpet player. And right out of actually before I even graduated from college, I was fortunate to get a job playing with the Naples Philharmonic in Florida. And I thought, well, here I go. I'm on my way. I got a job right out of school, and I'll stay here for a little while, and I'll get another job, and so forth and onward. And that's how we all hope our careers will go. And somewhere along the way, I mean, I know exactly where along the way, but for the sake of the listeners, I won't belabor that. I started doing some arranging for orchestra, just completely on a lark. And if you want to ask me the details at some point, I can share those too. But I started doing some arranging, and then did enough of that where I thought, well, gee, maybe I should try composing. And that went well. So I just started composing, and people started asking me to write stuff. And then lo and behold, people started offering money to write music, which I thought was the craziest thing in the world. I was going to be a trumpet player, And then it just kind of grew and grew, and it ended up being that I found composing to be, at least for me, much more interesting than trumpet playing. And my father was an entrepreneur, so I guess the idea of creating a living for myself out of things that were coming out of my own head was sort of intriguing to me. So long story, maybe getting longer, but after we had been in the orchestra, I say we because my wife was also in the Naples Philharmonic. She's a violinist. After we had been in there about 17 seasons, and I was kind of composing full-time at that point, playing trumpet full-time, and we had 4 young children, she looked at me and said, "This is crazy. Why don't we just move to Chicago and you can become a full-time composer?" And so we did. We quit the orchestra and moved to Chicago, and that was 8 years ago, and we haven't looked back. It's been a wild ride, and people have told us we were crazy, but it's been just a complete an unknown dream come true. It's really been a lot of fun doing this for a living.
Well, that's great. So there's a whole lot of questions in there that yes. I want to get to, but what I would like to know first of all is what did your father do as an entrepreneur?
Oh, he excuse me. He had 2 things he loved. He loved music, and he went to school as an electrical engineer. And I mean, he's a great keyboard player. He played in dance bands in college. He actually built my hometown church organ, an electric organ. So that was his musical love. He combined that with electrical engineering and built that organ. He went to Purdue, and then when he left Purdue, he worked for one company for a little while, and then about 8 years later, he started a company which I still don't know what the heck it did. It was something called he's probably going to hear this, so I should probably know what it did. It was high-speed data acquisition. High-speed data acquisition, where those superconductor tubes that we've heard about in Europe, where they spin an atom in a tube around really, really fast. At least,
yes,
that's what he's told me. He developed the equipment where you could measure what's happening to that atom as it's spinning 1 million miles an hour in those tubes. And so high-speed data acquisition. And
wow.
So he had a company for about 35 years that did that, and they had NASA as a client, and they had some other fancy people as clients. And so, but back to his music love, he also invented a synthesizer back when synthesizers were brand new. And I can still remember as a young trumpet player, he would sample my sound as a trumpet player, and that would become part of his synthesizer.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
wow.
back in the 70s, when Kurt Weill and Moog and all those people were doing it, he was doing it too.
Huh.
So that was my father. Is my father. He's still.
Well, I'm wondering whether I should have had your father on instead of you, because he sounds like you're interesting, but you're not that interesting. Oh my goodness.
All humble humility aside, my dad is a brilliant man, and the things that he thinks of just blow my mind. And the fact that he invented a synthesizer and built a church organ, and it's like I don't even know what he did. He's so smart, and so I have to just put that out there. And he's a pretty cool guy.
As you saw, I was nodding along like I understood the atom measurement thing. I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." I mean, if someone had to, I had no idea what you were talking about at all. You could have totally made that up. There's probably one scientist that listens to this and be like, "He's totally making this up." Yeah, and Andrew is not smart enough to follow. Yeah, to figure it out. So, did you have kind of an entrepreneurial itch as a result of seeing the path that your father's life had taken while you were practicing /in an orchestra, or did that kind of come about out of nowhere later?
There are two things that I remember that maybe contribute. The answer is no. I never thought when I was 25, I never thought to myself, gee, I should really start my own company. I mean, that never ever crossed my mind. But I do remember as a kid, like riding in the car with my dad and hearing him constantly talk about the ups and downs about running a company.
Right.
And that was intriguing to me. It was interesting listening to him. I wasn't bored, so that's part of the background. And then I always remember him saying when I started thinking about becoming a composer full time, so maybe in my early 30s, his response was, yeah, that's about when I started my company. And so that was kind of like, oh, well, maybe this is normal. Maybe I should do this kind of thing. So in that respect, there's a definite correlation.
Yeah, I do a lot of listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship and business and that have nothing to do with music or the arts at all. And it seems like it's a kind of a common thread. There are some people that are entrepreneurs like in college is when they figure out that that's the route they're going to go, and that's how they kind of go. But there's a whole lot of people who end up, across all disciplines, who end up getting either not failing to get the job that they really want, and then doing something about it, or getting the job that they always wanted, and then figuring out that it still left them wanting a little bit. So
sure.
I think it's a pretty common path. So. Okay, so how did you get your first paid arranging job for an orchestra? How did that come about?
Well, it was kind of trial by fire, but what happened was, so I joined the Naples Philharmonic. I was a 21-year-old kid, and 21. Enough said, right? But we had to do a lot of educational concerts, as all orchestra musicians do. So they would send our brass quintet out to school, 25 schools a year, and pretty soon our repertoire ran a little dry, and we needed something to do to educate kids, or to have, you can only play William Tell so many times for the kids, and you're like, gosh, we got to do something different.
Sure.
So I wasn't paid for this, but I decided that we decided that we should do a Disney tune, Under the Sea, from The Little Mermaid, for the brass quintet. And we were in rehearsal, and I remember us looking around and people saying, anybody want to do it? And I raised my hand and said, sure, I'll do it. So I did Under the Sea and got immediate gratification because the kids liked it. And that was my very first chart, and I still remember writing it all out by hand.
To interrupt, I played Under the Sea for children's shows in my one and only season with Dallas Brass before joining Boston Brass. So you just kind of took me down memory lane. Yeah, and I don't remember who did the arrangement, but it was a really good one. I don't know if it was yours or not, but it was great bass line. I remember that much. So
which you said it was with which brass group?
Dallas Brass. It was with quintet and drums.
I wonder if I sent that. Was it Mike who ran the show there?
It was.
I wonder if I sent. I don't think you did mine, but
that would be a super small world, department right there if that was. But
if you were playing a poorly done manuscript copy, it might have been mine.
No, this was pretty polished too. Judging by your rating, I'm guessing it was annoyingly polished out of the gate, but this was quite good. So anyway, sorry, proceed.
No, that's fine. So I did a bunch of quintet stuff after that, and that became was told to Eric Hunzel, who is a world famous pops conductor. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he became our pops conductor at the Naples Philharmonic, and he was always looking for arrangers. and somebody must have mentioned to him that I had been doing some arranging for the brass quintet. And so he pulled me aside one day and said, "Jim, do you want to arrange Here Comes Santa Claus for the orchestra? Because we need it for our Christmas concerts this year." And, so it quickly went through my head, okay, I'm a trained orchestral trumpet player, and now I'm doing Here Comes Santa Claus for orchestra. Okay, why not? And so I said yes. And like I said, it was trial by fire because I had to quickly learn how to score for strings and harp and percussion and all these instruments I had never written for. But that went well, and he asked me to do another 3 or 4, and before I knew it, I was getting hired to do charts for Cincinnati Pops, and they were recording arrangements of mine, so it kind of went quickly, and it was like almost immediately for some of the top, it was like a top gig immediately. So
wow. So what made you say yes when the Under the Sea question was posed?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, not specifically about Under the Sea, but just about arranging or composing in general. And I think I'm just one of those people who likes to, when I see a door open, I like to see what's on the other side. Just why not try it out? And always curious, always interested, and it just became a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know what the climate is these days, but maybe back then people would have frowned on being a conservatory trained musician and arranging Here Comes Santa Claus. But for me, it was a blast. And that also maybe goes back to my father, because when I was growing up, as I said, he was a keyboard player and he was always playing show tunes or popular tunes at the piano. So that stuff was kind of already in my ear and not a negative thing to listen to.
Of course. So. That actually reminds me that a friend of mine who ended up he and his wife were like the executive producers for the brass recording project that Lance and JD and Rich and Kevin Gibo and I did a couple of years ago. He has been a friend of mine for a long time, but had not through classical circles. And he and his wife came up in my first season with Boston Brass in 2000. We were playing in Napa, I believe, and it was the very beginning of December. It was like December 1st or December 2nd, and they came up to see a Boston Brass show. And afterwards, they told me, because we're quite good friends, they said we got to be honest that we didn't know that it was a Christmas concert. And then when we came and saw that it was, his wife was a music major in college, and that they said that they were a little disappointed, but. J.D. Shaw, who was doing all of the arranging at the time, the arrangements were just absolutely killer. I mean, like stunningly beautiful arrangements from the Nutcracker to like really swinging, like awesome, super creative. He took like the Caravan, and like put green sleeves to this driving like drum corps-esque Caravan groove that we did. So it was like this beautiful melody that was angry and driving. And yeah, it was a really cool compliment actually to JD for his writing, through me, just saying how, it was a Christmas concert and we were excited to see you do what you do, but we were blown away by how great it was. So there's an opportunity, because most Christmas music, that's written that in arrangements are not, they're good at best. So, but that's an opening for somebody like you.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think coming from my position as being in the orchestra, and maybe even specifically second trumpet, because I wanted to make sure I wrote things that were interesting for the players to play.
Right.
We sit there in the orchestra, and so often you get charts that are just, oh my gosh, you're counting the minutes or seconds till it's over. And so it was interesting to me to try to create Christmas tunes that both the players would enjoy playing and the audience would enjoy listening to.
Very interesting. So, how many years into your 17 years in Naples, in the orchestra there, did your first paid, how much overlap was there between your first check for arranging and when you left the orchestra?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, that arrangement I did in I'm going to date myself, but it was like 1993. So that was my third year into the orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And I was already arranging, and then we didn't leave till 2007. So, there was a long process there between, okay, how serious am I getting as an arranger composer, and how serious am I about trumpet anymore? But it was, it all made sense. I mean, it was like, it was a very organic process, okay, now I'm so busy composing, a choice definitely had to be made, in 2007.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
So, how? I think there's a whole lot of people that end up going down the the arrangement road, and some people that get really good at it that do not ever venture across the tracks to hearing and great arrangers like J.D. Shaw, who's just on my mind. There's lots of them, but it's incredible how he can take a tune you've heard 1,000 times and can, even with some of the same instruments. I mean, it's like sometimes you hear there are tunes that have been arranged for brass quintet 100 times, and sometimes some people have the ability with that 101st arrangement you've heard to just tell a completely fresh story, and you kind of, me as a performer, can stop and analyze it, because I've been lucky enough to play some of the best and some of the worst arrangements, out there, as most of us have that have been around for a while. But how did you go all the way to composing, and what made you want to do that?
Yeah, well, maybe that's the entrepreneurial thing, but I had done enough arranging that I still remember distinctly thinking to myself, wow, I'm arranging all these other people's melodies. Why don't I just try to write a melody of my own and arrange it? So there's actually a kind of a cool story about how I started as a composer, and if we have time, I'll share it.
Please.
You can just say shut up whenever you need to, but
we'll just edit it out. I won't even tell you. That's what producers are for.
I like telling the story because it speaks in one case to my executive director of the orchestra on the one hand, and then also tells the story of how I became a composer. But there was a class being held at Northwestern in the summertime. Naples Philharmonic in Florida, we didn't work in the summer, so we could do whatever we wanted in the summer. And there was a class the summer of 1994, I think. Maybe it was actually 93, so this is still pretty early on. I'd probably done about 5 or 6 arrangements, maybe 10 for brass quintet and 5 for orchestra.
You took this class, for the record, either 1 or 2 months before I showed up for my freshman year. So I enrolled at Northwestern in 1993,
Yep.
In the fall. Yep.
Well, it was with a guy named Amnon Woolman, if you know that.
Yeah, I sure do. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So he was teaching this class, and it was called Adventures in Bad Music. And I don't know if you remember that. There was an old radio show called Adventures in Good Music. So it was a takeoff on that.
Okay.
And the whole class... Oh, I got to tell the story about the executive director. So I heard about this class, and I said her name was Myra Daniels. She ran the Naples Philharmonic. And I said, Myra, there's this class being held at Northwestern. It's a 3-week class, and I'm really thinking about taking it, and it's $600. And, I don't even know why I told her that, but she took out her checkbook on the spot right there and said, here's $600. You need to go take that class.
Wow.
So, what a great thing to do for a 24-year-old kid or whatever I was. And
she saw something in you, obviously.
I don't know what she saw.
Maybe she was just trying to get you out of town.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe he'll leave forever. Yeah. No, so she paid for the entire thing without even thinking about it. She took out her checkbook on the spot and handed me a check.
Wow.
So I went off to Northwestern that summer. I knew you were going to be there that fall, so I wanted to check it out, make sure you'd like it. And and this class was... It was not a theory class. It was not a counterpoint class. It was nothing about actual writing. It was a discussion class with about 12 or 13 people like myself. And we talked about bad music. I mean, you were just talking about bad arrangements and things like that. And so the Amnon Woolman, the professor, kept posing this question, if you've heard a bad piece of music, he kept saying, name one. And I raised my hand. I said, well, apologies to any country western fans out there, but I said, hey, I heard this country western piece. It was terrible. And he goes, what was the name of it? And I can't remember now, but I told him at that time. And he said, well, if 5 million people bought that in the last month, who are you to say that's a bad piece of music? You know. So we would talk about things like that, and our final assignment of the 3-week class was to compose a bad piece of music.
Huh.
Our final assignment was to write a bad piece of music. And I figured, this is a no-brainer. I've never written an original piece in my life, so I went back to my dorm room at Northwestern and I wrote a trumpet duet. And I brought a friend of mine in, and we performed it the next day. Actually, before that, I played a Charlier etude. It's like you can cut this part out, but it was about trills. It was all trills. And I said, "See, that's a bad piece," and they all agreed. But anyway, the next day, I brought in a
we're probably not cutting that out, just to let you know. So.
Oh, well, if anybody knows Charlier Etude number 36, if any trumpet players are listening, that's a bad piece of music.
That's funny.
So the next day, I brought in my trumpet duet and we played it, and I'll never forget one of the participants raising his hand and said, "Jim, you failed. That was actually a really good piece." And so I failed the assignment to write a bad piece. So that launched me into my composing world, because I figured, man, if I tried to write a bad piece and it turned out good, what would happen if I tried to write good music? So,
wow.
So with that, actually, you should know this. Well, I should tell you this now. So I went back that fall. I wrote one of my first pieces, which was my tuba concerto. Tuba within the brass quintet.
Right.
That's like Opus 2.
Right. Oh, wow.
And I'm not saying you need to know this piece. I'm not saying you need to sing it to me, but that was one of my first opuses, and so that started me down my career of composing.
Wow, that's a crazy story. So this class crazy. and the name of it, and I'm glad you explained the play on it, because I thought it was funny, but I did not know that show about the good music. So, and then the fact that the executive director paid for it, then you went, and that's really fascinating. So your first composition was an attempt at bad music for an assignment that ended up being good.
You got exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to
just had you tell it. You very concise.
Yeah. Could have saved everyone the last 8 minutes of their lives. No, that was. Right. I just wanted to make sure that I followed all that. That was like, there's a lot of layers to that. That's really cool. So what? How did you get your first commission to compose?
Yeah, so I think. So, of course, as all composers do, at that point, I wrote a bunch of music, for free, and just hoped to get people to play it. And so the tuba concerto got played, and then I wrote a couple more brass quintets. And then, as you know, being in the performer business, we have a lot of friends who are doing kind of the same thing. And so, gosh, I think my Legend of Sleepy Hollow for orchestra actually was my first paid commission. So the executive director who paid for my class, now she's kind of following my career to see if that amounted to anything. And we had a Halloween concert coming up in 1996. So obviously we're fast forwarding maybe a couple of years here. And I said to her, "Hey, I'd love to write a piece for our Halloween concert." And she said, "Okay, why don't you do it?" And I got the conductor on board, and they paid me $500 to write. It was a 20-minute piece for orchestra, and I got $500. But I poured my heart into that piece. Yeah, I studied up on Washington Irving. I studied up on. There's so much that went into my Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I just rescored it for band, and so it's kind of bizarre that we're talking about it right now. But, I think back to it now, and I put so much homework into just writing this piece that I was getting paid $500 to write. It sort of speaks to, I think, why I'm now a composer, because I took it really seriously and tried to make it the best thing ever. And it's funny and it turned out really well. I'm really happy with the piece. But it's funny, after the premiere, so in our Halloween concerts in Naples, we all wore costumes. As many orchestras do for Halloween concerts. And so I dressed up as Ichabod Crane because I wrote the piece about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I stood up to take my bow. The conductor had me take my bow. And I think the audience thought that I was just standing up because I was dressed like Ichabod Crane. they didn't realize that I'd actually written a piece. So normally a composer, when you at a premiere, the applause really swells when you get when you get your bow, but the applause kind of hardly even, like the decibel level hardly even made a notch. They were like, "Why is this guy standing up? He's dressed as Ichabod Crane." You know, at least that's what
he's not even first trumpet.
I actually think it's quite a good piece. I'm very proud of it. So the heck with that audience.
What do they know?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I know that that for me, there's I think a lot of creative types. I guess I can certainly speak for myself, and I think there are others. I've had students that are like this, where you're doing something, and then you want to do something that's either related or unrelated, and you think about it a lot, and you kind of talk about it, and you think about it, and you talk about it some more, and you think a lot about it, and then but it can be hard rather to just kind of take that leap. But it sounds like that's a leap that you're used to taking, from saying, yeah, I'll arrange Under the Sea, to arranging for the orchestra, to the composition class, to asking if you could that kind of takes to take some stones to go up to your orchestra, and say, can I write a composition? Can I get paid to write a composition? Oh, that, by the way, has never happened before for our concert. I mean, there's, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I was probably one of those kids in their 20s. Actually, I know this, that probably annoyed a lot of people, because I mean, I'm saying this with, because I think I was a little bit maybe I can do this kind of attitude.
Good for you.
Don't say no to me. I probably annoyed a lot of people being that way, but I've learned a lot about myself since then, so I hope I'm not like that anymore. But it was just, once I did it, it was so interesting to me to do it. It was something. It was a need I needed to fulfill. So I couldn't imagine. If somebody was going to say no to me, I probably would have just looked somewhere else, because it was just something I had to do. But I should say something about the commissions, because it was a trumpet piece that I wrote that I think kind of really got me going in the composition world. Rich Stoltzel. You must know Rich, mm-hmm. Right? He teaches at McGill now. He's just taken a position teaching at McGill. He was always very active commissioning people to write for the trumpet. He thought a lot of new music needed to be written. And so he commissioned me to write my first trumpet sonata. And that was kind of a piece that, at least compositionally, took me over the hump, because I was afraid to write for my own instrument, just because I knew my own limitations. So I had to write beyond what I thought I could do on the trumpet. And that was my first serious piece, at least on the chamber music level. And that kind of got me some notice within the trumpet world. And I had so many friends in the brass world that kind of spurred many things on for me, and kind of haven't looked back since then, I would say.
Cool.
So that bears mention.
That I can do it attitude. I've found that's one of the things that you can certainly kind of cultivate that and try and draw it out, even more so in students. But that's, like, I've found for my skill set, I think that's the hardest thing to instill in a student. I mean, not that everybody. I don't think that you're born with that kind of stuff necessarily, but that's just such an important trait to say I can do it. And there was a chance that your Under the Sea arrangement was going to fall on its face. I mean, just like completely face plant, and then it's a brass quintet. The four guys, gals, whatever, in the quintet that were there with you would probably have told you in a loving / direct way how it was a dumpster fire of an arrangement. It's like that can be that can be a tough room, like any brass quintet, but you did it. So that's like the kind of trait that I look for. If I have a student who comes in the door who's raw and who maybe hasn't had the the teaching track record in their past of some of the other students, but they've got that attitude. Like, I don't know what they're going to end up doing. They might be a tuba player, they might be a composer, they might be an electrical engineer someday, even as a music major. But man, I'm putting all my money on that kid, So whether they rub people the wrong way or not. So I never rubbed anyone wrong when I was in my 20s. So
Never.
Pretty much everyone. So yeah, that's.
Hey, you know what else is funny about mentioning the Under the Sea arrangement? I think it's funny that we won't say that launched my career, but it kind of got me started, right?
Sounds like it did, yeah.
But I think it's funny that my acceptance came from a bunch of fourth graders, right? Because we were doing educational concerts, and they were the ones that went nuts when we started playing that piece. So my pat on the back to get my career going came from fourth graders, and here I am now. So,
thank you for pointing. That's awesome that you point that out. Lance LeDuc, who I just interviewed for this, although yours might air before his, I'm not exactly sure, but he's a freshman advisor at Carnegie Mellon. Every single incoming music major has him like as not an academic advisor, like kind of like a career advisor, where they meet with him for 15 or 30 minutes at the beginning of their freshman year. And he said that the main purpose of that is that he grants them permission to go out into the world and to do whatever the heck it is that they're going to do, And he said sometimes he actually will like physically tap them on the shoulder and say, "I have just granted you permission to, to go and become the first, famous viola trio." I mean, whatever the heck, whatever off the wall thing that they're thinking, and that's what those fourth graders did for you, is they like gave you permission to think of yourself as a writer, which is funny because they're 9. It's like makes no sense, and yet on a human level, it makes all of the sense in the world.
Yeah, I guess we never know when it's going to happen. I mean, I didn't know it was happening at that time.
Sure,
but you're right. I never thought of it that way. That they granted me permission, but you're absolutely right. Oh. That's a good point.
Interesting. I've noticed, I'm listening back to podcasts, I choose guests like you who are interesting, but I say interesting after just about every answer, which is getting annoying. So I'm outing myself in an effort to stop, because people are going to start noticing, and they're going to be like, "This is terrible." Let me guess.
You could edit it out and add other words. You could say fascinating, marvelous, or
it would be very funny if it was just like a different level of suddenly like fascinating. Yeah, but it just didn't. It was too loud or too soft or too distant or something. Yeah, that actually could. Don't give my producer ideas, man. We our two producers. Do you know Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler? They're from the Fredericksburg Brass Institute.
Yeah.
Two, I call them kids. They're not kids, but they're about 24, and they're both like lighting the world on fire. So, and Lance and I, especially on the Brass Junkies, we make a whole lot of fun of them always. And we completely ignore how much power they have over us, since they're the ones that splice these things together, and they can make us sound even dumber than we do already. So I should probably be nicer to them. Note to self, but I won't have follow through on that, I'm sure. So. And two trumpet players. So, yeah, it's like, it's weird. Like Lance and I got out of a brass quintet, and we're like, you know what we should do? We should hire a couple of trumpet players to work with. It's like, wait, isn't this what we're talking to our therapists about? Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Both of those guys have suffered through my music, but Buddy has cooked for me, and he's a fine cook. So if he hasn't cooked for you yet, make sure he cooks for you.
He hasn't, and that kind of hacks me off a little bit, actually.
Well, it was through that through Rodney Marcellus. Sorry, I've always remembered it as Rodney Mack. Through his brass
retreat.
Summer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
So I always think of Buddy with an apron on.
Oh, that's good.
You can edit that out if you want.
I won't. Actually, it'll be Austin who's putting this together, and Austin will definitely not edit that out. So, and they're both really fantastic trumpet players too. But enough about them. I'm talking to a trumpet player about other trumpet players. This interview went off the rails. So, you know what that segment was? It was interesting. So, all right, good. or fascinating. Yeah, I got a fascinating. All right. Can you talk to me about publishing? About do you self-publish? Do you publish through a company? Do you do one exclusively? Is there a mixture?
Yeah, there's a mixture. I had an early experience with publishing, which directly led me to self-publishing. when I wrote that tuba concerto, actually, that you should play. It was.
I should.
It was. It was picked up by. I never know whether to say Editions BIM or Editions BIM. The Switzerland publishing company.
Right.
Here I was. It was like the first piece I wrote, and it was getting published by this Swiss publishing house, which I was thrilled to death about. Right?
That's over the moon exciting.
Yeah. And so they picked it up, and they sold like 50 copies in the first year, and I got a check for $50. And I said to myself, hey, this isn't right.
That's exactly $50 more than I got that year for selling my non-existent tuba concertos.
Exactly. So it was that experience which kind of led me to look into other people who maybe were publishing themselves. However, that was back in the very early days of Finale and all that stuff, and so the music didn't look very good. I didn't really know how to make my music look, take the rough edges off and make it look published. So I just didn't really seek out any other publishers after that. I just kept writing my music and kind of building inventory, if you will. And then when it sort of became easier for us to use Finale and publish it ourselves, I just started self-publishing. I wanted to. Maybe that's my dad's influence over me again. I just wanted to be in charge of my own product. If it was bad, I wanted to take responsibility. If it was good, I wanted to reap the rewards. So I just kind of started publishing on my own. And if it looked bad, people would tell me, and I'd make it look better. If it sounded bad, people would tell me, and I wanted to make it sound better. So I started self-publishing almost from the get-go, give or take a few years. There are mixed, and to further answer your question, I have a few band pieces published by I believe our mutual friend Brian Balmage's FJH.
Yep.
So they've taken on maybe 5 band pieces of mine.
Great.
But everything else, I have a catalog of roughly 200 works. So everything else is published by me. And that has its pluses and minuses, that means that I have to print everything. I have to ship everything out. I'm in charge of everything, right? So there's a lot of work involved. And it also means distribution is my complete, advertising, all that. I'm responsible for all of that. But on the other hand, as I've already said, that also means that I get 100% rather than 10% of whatever, So you have to decide if you're going to be a self-published composer, whether you're up for all of that. And in my case, I have the blessing that my wife takes care of all the shipping and printing and all that stuff. So we're a team when it comes to Stephenson music. And so I can write all the music myself, and then I send it off to her, and she takes care of shipping and all that stuff. So we love it. We're a good team. So
that's great.
That's great. Yeah.
When you began the self-publishing thing, and as you just talked about, everything from fulfilling orders to marketing to, and oh, by the way, you still got to write the music. There's a lot of layers there. Did that end up? Did you develop a passion for that side of the business along the lines of how the writing did, or is it just something that you do because for monetary reasons?
I would say that my passion lies, and I know this comes from my parents, I keep going back to them, but my passion lies in, and this speaks for my composing too, absolutely wanting the people playing my music or buying my music to be happy and satisfied with what they're getting. So if that means that I've written something and the page turns aren't right, or there's a flat missing, or the music looks bad, then I want it to be better. And I want them to be happy. I don't want somebody to be sitting on stage and missing a note because I made a mistake in composing it or publishing it or whatever. So, and let's face it, we sometimes get, if I go through some of my music, this harkens back, I don't mean to diss Editions BIM, but there were mistakes in that published piece, And so they were getting all the money and there were mistakes in it. And so that didn't make me happy as the creator of the piece. So my passion is just customer service, and whether that's the music, how it sounds, or how it looks. So, do I get thrilled having to make 50 copies of one piece? No, I wouldn't say that. It's much more interesting to me to compose music.
Sure.
I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
I just enjoy the process of people being happy with what they're getting from me, in a nutshell.
Well, and as a performer, my job is to play the tuba concerto of yours that I'm going to perform at some point. I just need to have someone hear this, be like, I'm going to hire him to play that piece. We can come full circle here. If I'm playing your tuba concerto, then all I'm trying to do is through the ink or lack of ink on the page, I'm just trying to figure out what was in your head, and I'm trying to not only get that out of my bell, but get that into the ears of the audience. And, we've all played music that is written in a way that makes it really easy for me to do that. And also even just how it's written, and really difficult for me to do that. The responsibility falls on the performer, of course, whatever's coming out of our bell or, violin or, whatever is our problem. But, that's interesting. So it's kind of creative control was part of what continues to drive you down that road in terms of being able to fix things and to keep customers happy.
Yeah, I mean, to what you're saying, it's my job as the composer to make sure that all you have to think about is making the best music you can. If you're sitting there and there's a part in front of you and it makes your job harder, then I've failed.
Right.
So that's what I'm interested in. I'm not saying a lot of my music is rather difficult, but still, I want it to be a rewarding effort for the performer to figure out how to play it and deliver their message.
Is there any one aspect of self-publishing that has proven to be more difficult than you had expected?
Gosh, how do I frame this answer? I think there is, there might be people listening that could possibly write to me or call me and tell me I'm wrong with this, and I would welcome that because I want to learn every chance I get. But I do think there is, we are at a disadvantage because there are there are a few publishing houses that kind of control the music market. They're the ones who are shipping really nice catalogs because they have the financial means to do so.
Yep.
Where they can hear great performances in a nicely packaged CD within the published book catalog that they're sending out. So these are the people that we living self-published composers are up against. So it's hard. It is really hard to reach I wish I could push a button and have my band music heard by every high school or college band in the country, but I just don't have the means to do that. So I rely a lot on word of mouth and just people talking about my music. So that's the hardest thing about it. I will not hide that fact from anybody who's interested. That's something you have to be willing to accept as a challenge, So a lot of my day is spent, not a lot of my day, some of my day is spent advertising, most of my day is spent composing. So it is the reality of being self-published that you have to be willing to put in the time, for sure.
I would point out that you are good at the social media thing, which is something that is that a lot of musicians, I think, don't give it enough thought, and so they end up, you absolutely sell your wares, and you tell people what you're up to, and you point out that this person has paid me money to compose and this, that, whatever, but it's all in a very human way, and it's I don't ever feel like you're talking at me, which is really, really, really important when you're marketing. Especially in a tight-knit community like the music business, because we've all got something to sell in the music business. So if we just, if it's just kind of like eye roll, like, oh, good, yeah, Jim's reading his CV in 140, character, tweets again. He does this every 3 months. It's not that way. It's like you're very, you do it well on a human level. So, which is important because, like you said, you don't have a marketing department. You are the marketing department.
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I've put some dogs out there too. I mean, I've put some things up there that I've regretted putting up there.
Right.
And there are times when people have said, "Jim, that didn't come over maybe quite the way you meant it to." And so, if you're willing to listen to somebody's critique and say, "Oh gosh, maybe you're right. Maybe I should watch what I'm saying next time." And I'm sure in the future I'll probably make some posts or whatever that maybe don't come out very well, and you just have to be willing to kind of. I mean, I do think that I'm a very honest person, and I'm not trying to be a used car. Well, there might be some used car salesmen out there, so I don't mean to offend anyone, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes, a stereotypical used car salesman is what you're talking about. Yeah, because there are some that are just as honest as any of us, and then there are the others who are, you show up to buy a Honda Civic from 1997, and they try and get you to buy like some Toyota Sienna minivan that's got 3,000 miles on it from 2014. You're like, wait, no, I don't have $27,000. What's happening? Right. Yeah. I
mean, I like people. I like working with people, and I want. Look, it's much more worthwhile to spend our lives getting along with people. So that's what I'm trying to get out there. That I love working with people, and if you happen to like my music and want to work with me, then that's great. If I do something that makes you mad and we don't get to work together, I apologize, and maybe someday. But that's just the message I'm trying to get out there.
Well, and something that I think that you're getting at as well is that that you obviously you take pride in your work, which you should, not just because the marketplace agrees with you, although that's a great validator. Obviously, being able to pay your mortgage as the result of composing, it helps to kind of call yourself a composer on the business card, But if you're proud of the music that you're putting out, then it's not ego to be hopeful that if I am to buy your piece and to perform it, that it's going to bring a concrete value add to my life as well. So it's not that you're trying to pawn off some piece that, I wrote that tuba concerto. The thing is, it's a hot mess. I did it in in 2 days, and I was drinking the whole time. It was it was a tight deadline. I really did, I hate that piece of music. I don't even go to performances of it. It's like, no, that's going to make my life better, and you're hoping that that's going to make the audience like it, which is going to make me look good. And so that I think that's sometimes is a part of that musicians don't grasp about marketing or about selling themselves, that you're not trying to pull one over on somebody. You're just trying to get your music out there, which if it's good, which in my opinion, it absolutely passes all of these tests with flying colors, it's going to make the audience, the performer, you, everybody's life better. So so push it.
You brought up such a good point, and I don't want to take you on a tangent, so you can.
No, go.
You can, but this actually comes up in the composer world quite often. You'll hear at master classes, you'll hear a composer ask, do you care about your audience? And I've heard several where the composer will say, no, I don't care about my audience. And I understand what they're saying, but I phrase it a different way. I mean, the audience, the players, they've all invested. The audience has invested money to be at a concert. They've invested their time to be at a concert. The performers have invented who knows how many practice hours to perform your music at that concert. So you better believe I respect them very much. I mean, there are so many composers they could choose from. There are so many concerts the audience could choose from. So yes, I want them to enjoy that concert. I want them to enjoy my music. I want them to feel like that investment was worth it. And the way I answer the question of, do you care about your audience? Yes, but my audience is also a bunch of Jim Stephensons out there. Like I can't imagine. I have no idea what goes through your head, for example, when you're listening to a concert. So what I do is I write music for a bunch of me's out there. It has to please my ear, and then hopefully that will also please the people performing it and people playing it and listening to it. I take it all very seriously. I don't want anybody to feel like it was a waste of their time. So
sure. Well, and in that scenario, that whole chain of human beings that you talked about that are involved in hearing a performance of your piece, like the vast majority of the time, 99.9% of all of those people are there voluntarily. Are involved in the process voluntarily. I mean, whoever whoever paid you the commission, whoever's performing, whoever's in the audience, et cetera. I do remember we used to, every once in a while, we would get like, especially on Monday nights in the fall, like before DVRs were really popular, you'd always get like some guy who was dragged to a brass quintet concert who wanted to be watching Monday Night Football, who would just glare at us for 2 hours, which was always funny because JD would aim the trumpet at that guy in Caravan. It's just like it was like red meat. It's just like it was. But that's because we weren't really nice people. So you sound like a nice person, but we were like, this guy looks miserable. Let's make him a little more miserable. So, my guess is that would be a barrier to some people's self-publishing. Is that you have to be. How many composers are there in the world who have to do zero marketing of any kind at all ever? And are self-published. Yes, there's if John Williams is self-publishing at this point in his career, obviously people are going to come to him, and the answer's not 2, but the answer is also not 2,000. Not even close, right? So,
right,
yeah,
let's face it, we living composers are competing against dead composers.
A lot of them.
We're competing against other living composers. I hate using the word compete, but we'll use it for the sake of this argument. We're competing if we're self-publishing, we're competing against mammoth-sized publishers. So yeah, that's what allows me to post on Facebook like you've seen, or Twitter or whatever, because I have to do it. I just have to. But at the same time, I want to do it in a way, as you've thankfully, I appreciate it, pointed out, that doesn't hopefully offend people. And Facebook is free, so how can you not take advantage of that?
Sure. Yeah, Lance and I have to push our Pedal Note Media stuff, and I wrote a book, for band directors about tuba, and if I just quietly in my office write a book for band directors about the tuba, and and then I just quite quietly click, submit, and then the thing goes up on Amazon. It's like, tuba books don't get like front page on Amazon. Like when you go to unlock your Kindle, there's not an advertisement there that's static saying you should buy this tuba book. No one would ever know that it was there. So, and there's a fine line though. I can't just say, hey, have I told you about my book? Hey, did you hear about my book? Hey, did you know that I have a mouthpiece? Hey, did you know that I'm developing another mouthpiece? Hey, did you know that I have 2 podcasts? Hey, So, and some people can be really turned off by that, but there are a number of examples in our business of people that are really good at the balance, and about plugging other people's stuff as well, which I see you doing a lot of, which is championing. Thank you. Yeah, see, I play the tuba. Yeah, we make fun of trumpet players because you can spit out the complicated words like that one, which was like 3 syllables. Championing, that's 4 syllables. See, I can't even count to 4, which is ironic. I'm a tuba player. That's all I do, right, is count to 4. So,
even if it has oompa, and if you mix the, sorry.
I walked into that. You know what? That segment was interesting. All right, but aren't they all? All right. Okay, great. There's a number of avenues that I could go down a heck of a lot further with you. You have a fascinating story, and I like your approach. And also, if it's not clear that I'm a huge fan of his music, as he said, just to the audience in general, as he said, a lot of his music is incredibly difficult. Was it called Rextreme, that you wrote for Rex?
Yes.
Yeah, that which is this piece that he wrote for Rex Richardson, who is a jerk because he makes people like Jim Stephenson think that that is supposed to come out of trumpet bells. But I don't go looking for this kind of music, but I personally am not at all a fan of music that's really hard for the sake of being really hard. And your music is incredibly virtuosic. Not all of it, but a lot of it is incredibly virtuosic. But it's cool. It's it seems like it's something that needed to be said. It's not just high notes and fast and and things that Rex Richardson can do, and that I just sit there and say, I'm glad I play the tuba. So everyone should go ahead and check out Jim's music, whether you're a performer or whether you're just listening. And actually, this is kind of leading into this naturally, so why don't I ask you now, what is your website?
StevensonMusic.com.
Okay,
and
good.
My last name is spelled with a PH, so that's, it sounds like Stephenson music, but it's Stevenson Music.
Got it. Great.
Thank you for saying those nice things about my music.
Yeah, of course. No, it's with all of the music. I think that for my taste, that composers are frequently, and composers slash arrangers are frequently like performers, where most of them, even the good ones, I just kind of not in a casting aspersions way, but I just lump a lot of them kind of in the middle, where it's like I could enjoy it, and but it can be hard to have your own voice, really, like truly have your own voice as a composer, or truly have your own voice as a pianist or a trumpet player or a clarinetist or whatever. And I for my taste, you absolutely, there's a Jim Stephenson sound, which is great. So, and that's not to say you're not versatile. You are. So, hopefully, I'm making sense. So, but yeah, bottom line is go listen to his music. So, since he and I are such dear friends, since that phone call, I'm like, hey, who is this? Oh, cool. That's right. I guess we're friends now. Thanks, Rex.
That's right.
All right, so we are now to the 5 questions segment at the end of the interview. Number 1, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Wow, man, I had this when you mentioned this to me earlier. I might have to come back to this one. What is the best piece of advice I've ever received?
Or what is a piece of advice that's really good that is coming to mind? We won't hold you to the absolute best.
Good.
Take the pressure off a little bit.
You mean as a composer?
Yes. Anything. Composer, human, entrepreneur, musician.
Gosh, I hate to be cliche. Let me see.
A lot of cliches are good, in my opinion.
Well, the one that comes to mind about composing, and so I'm thinking this would probably transfer to any avenue that someone would choose, but a lot of times as a composer, it's so easy to just get hung up on, oh my gosh, this has to be the best thing ever before I even write a note. I have to come up with the perfect idea in my head before I even start. And of course that leads to writer's block and all that stuff. So every piece I start, and I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but the whole just do it thing comes to mind, where you just got to jump in there and write. And just, if you're writing bad music, just write. If you're starting a company and it's not the best company in the world, right, then just start it and learn from your mistakes and go. And so this all has to do with that whole thing that seems to be popping up on the internet all over the place these days, which is, Michael Jordan missed a gazillion free throws, or Larry Bird missed a gazillion shots, or whatever. And failure is what we learn best from. So like when I'm starting to write a piece, I just write bad music, and then there's maybe one note that's good, and go with that one, and learn why the other ones are bad, and throw those away and go with the good ones. So just don't be afraid to fail.
Embrace failure.
A long-winded way to say don't be afraid.
No, that's great. Yeah, if any of my students, and they'd all better be listening, if any of my students are listening, they're rolling their eyes. They're like, he totally wrote that. He told him to read this, out loud. So, yeah, I'm always talking about embrace failure. And from the performing side of that, how do you get better at high notes? You play high notes. And you play them badly, and then you play them a little less bad, and you're analytical, and you try something, and then it gets worse, so you try something else, or it gets a little better. You do more of that, but then that gets worse. You just keep on. Yeah, it's...
No, not a single person was born able to play, a double G on trumpet. They had to figure it out somehow. Absolutely. Nobody was born knowing how to do it. They had to fail doing it, and then they figured it out. So.
And this is more of the brass junkie side of things, but really natural, quote unquote, players, because there are some players who just kind of pull the mouthpiece out of the pouch and plug it in, and they have tuba players that have like a low B flat the first day they ever play, which is not normal. Supernatural players tend to, not supernatural, but very natural. I was like, oh, this is a different podcast. The very natural players will frequently run into some kind of a problem in their career, whether it's when they turn 30 or 35 or 40 or 45, and if there's no developed skill set of how to work through problems, you don't want to be developing that when you're 40 years old and a professional and you're running into your first ever problem. So yeah, even if your first piece, and it sounds like it was good, then you better figure out how to write bad music, and you better figure out how to be approaching a deadline with that hanging over your head, and et cetera. So, good. That's a good cliche. That's an interesting cliche. All right. Number 2, what is a mistake you have made in your career, and what did you learn from it?
I wrote this down when you asked earlier, or you warned me that this question would be coming. We already talked a little bit about this, but I'll never forget. Okay, so we talked about how my boss back when I was in the orchestra, Myra, how she gave me the big break. She paid me $600 to go take that class, and I was doing arranging. Well, I got a little big in my britches too soon. I had some early success writing those arrangements for Eric Kunzel and a couple of compositions, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm so good. And I went into her office. I haven't told the story very often, so I went into her office like with a list of things that I thought she should have me do. Like I think you should now make me composer in residence for this orchestra, and I think you should hire me this often. And I had only written like 5 pieces and done maybe 10 arrangements, and I just thought I was so great.
I'm guessing that she had a list of things that she wanted you to do, and it was 1.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's what was I want to get back to your question. Phrase your question again.
What is a mistake that you've made in your career, and what did you learn from it?
So the mistake was being a little too proud of myself too soon, and not being patient. Yes, I knew that I felt that I had something in me, but there's a process. We need to earn our stripes, and I think I was and that set me back quite a bit with her. Demanding too much too soon. She basically laughed at me, and I think that set me down a few notches in her mind as to, I needed some humility. So I think I learned a big lesson from that, and I don't know if I answered your question.
I absolutely answered it. Yeah. Can you imagine if either one of us were able to somehow package humility that we could sell to like 25-year-olds like you and I both were? It sounds like if you could, you could charge $10,000 for that, and if it was genuine, then it's just like, my goodness, we would be having this interview together as we were, I don't know, in some exotic location that both of our families were with us. Yeah, it was just with money was no object. We'd be loaded. So,
humility. Oh gosh, it's a tough. Yeah, but I'm so glad I'm glad I had that happen. It was painful at the time, but gosh, what was I thinking?
Sure.
Anyway,
it can be a tough line to toe in our business, because there are some that are looking to knock you down, and you need to kind of stand up and mean it, and
right.
You need confidence. If you're writing for really great players, you better have confidence, and if you're performing really difficult music, you better have confidence. But sometimes that can creep over into other things, which can make people not want to play your music or talk to you about it, or have you perform theirs. So, okay, number 3, do you draw any business inspiration from outside of the music business?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I never did this before I started my own company, but I really pay attention to what very basic, we'll call them basic. They're not basic because they're all very creative and very successful. But, whether it's McDonald's running an ad on TV, or walking into your local supermarket and they're running a 2-for-1 or a 20% off this or whatever, or just how they word things or what sort of deals they're offering. We're very conscious in the music business, or at least I am, self-conscious about trying to sound too businessy, I guess is the word. I mean, we feel that we have this artistic product and people should just flock to us. But there are things to be learned from all these multi-gazillion-dollar companies. There's ways that they've achieved their success, and I think we can take from them and coin or couch it our own way with artistic language, and still use it, whether it's music we're selling, and hey, if you want to buy this sonata, I have this other piece that you might be interested in, and yeah, I'll sell it to you for 25% off because I really want you to play it. I mean, there's ways to learn from these big Starbucks types companies that I think as creative people we can figure out ways to make it work for our business as well. It is a business, let's face it. So
absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can learn from the McDonald's of the world. When I talk about marketing a lot, and I reference the book, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which and the whole premise of that talk is just that arts marketing is just like marketing hamburgers or tubes of toothpaste, which means that we can learn from Procter and Gamble and McDonald's and just about anywhere else. So. And
I think the most important, and I actually lost my connection with you there for a second, so I don't know what you just said, but I think
it was good.
I know, it was fantastic.
It was interesting, I can tell you that.
Said all night. But the one big thing which has hit home with me is, and this is what other businesses figure out, it's not how it's what is it about? Let me figure out how to phrase this. It's not about what's interesting to me. It's about what's interesting to you as my customer.
Yes.
I have to figure out how my music fits in with your life, not how your life fits in with my music. And that's a really important thing if I'm going to try to sell my music, because we have to connect with our customers. It's so basic. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's so basic, it's ridiculous. I obviously conduct these interviews with people who I find interesting, and I'm asking you questions that I obviously find interesting. I wouldn't be asking them, and yet if I didn't have like a specific typical listener to this in mind, then it's just going to kind of be all over the map, and maybe some people will find it kind of interesting, and then but no one's going to find it really interesting, so I got to figure out like what is it that who would be listening to the Entrepreneurial Musician podcast, and like what is it that they're going to want to know, and I try to think along those lines, like yeah, I've done arrangements, like how did he get paid for the first one? That's why I asked you that, or and this is not reinventing the wheel, like you said, it's so basic, it's ridiculous. I mean, yeah, you just kind of have to pay attention. Okay, he's arranging. Well, how did he start actually writing his own music? I never dreamed the story was going to be that interesting. So I took a class at Northwestern, and I was challenged to write a horrible piece of music, and here I am on your podcast. So that's pretty good. Okay, great. Number 4, who do you look up to as an arts entrepreneur? Could be a composer, could be a performance artist, it could be anybody.
Wow. Man, I wish I had more time to think about that one. I know you asked me at the beginning of the interview, but then we kind of went right into things.
I meant to send you these questions like a week ago. So how's that working out for you?
Yeah. Can I send you my answer in a week?
I can have Austin approximate your voice to the best of his ability, so he'll just see if anybody notices.
Gosh, man, who do I really look up to as an arts entrepreneur? What's going through my head is just all these, chamber ensembles that have, whether it's brass quintets or mixed ensembles or string quartets that have made it. This doesn't count because she makes it by virtue of just her fantastic violin playing. But Hilary Hahn, I'll never forget watching her interviews that she was doing with other people. Have you ever seen her YouTube interviews?
I have not.
Yeah, I mean, you think of Hilary Hahn as just somebody who is a fantastic violinist, right?
Of course.
But while she was traveling, she was interviewing composers or other performers or directors, engaging them in what they do. She's the one conducting the interview. She's not the one being interviewed. So she was making it interesting on so many levels because we discovered Hilary Hahn as a really funny, charismatic, genuine person who kind of broke down that wall of, on stage, she was connecting with us,
Right.
It's all about connecting. And then also another thing, this is going off topic again, but
Great.
along those connecting lines, have you noticed how a lot of restaurants now have opened up their kitchens so that we can see what they're doing in there?
Yep.
That didn't always used to be the way, right? I mean, it used to be the kitchen was behind a wall somewhere and we were out in the restaurant, but now they've opened that up and we can see what they're doing. And I think that's just part of the whole new business model, is letting people into your life and letting them see what we're doing. And so Hillary Hahn was doing that, and tons of other people. And so that's hard for me in a little way, because I'm kind of, believe it or not, a somewhat private person.
Right.
Those Facebook posts you see me do, it's hard for me to hit the send button because it's hard for me to open up to people. But I think that's just the era we live in, is that people want to know what's going on behind the scenes. So,
sure.
So that's two examples. I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. And last but not least, and then I'll get you out of here, what have you always wanted to achieve in the music business that you haven't to this point?
I want to write an opera. I love telling stories with music, and I love theatrical pieces. Actually, ever since I wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which we talked about earlier, I just like telling a story, and I haven't had the opportunity yet to write an opera. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm dying to write an opera. It's not something you just do and pick up your pencil one day and write an opera. So it'll take a while, but it'll happen.
And that actually just reminded me of one question that I forgot in the main portion of the interview, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on just briefly. I've got all the time in the world. I'm just not looking to take your entire evening here. In terms of crowdfunding, have you done anything with Kickstarter or with Indiegogo or with anything like that, or has it just been kind of hitting up contacts and things for consortiums, things like that?
I've done. I'm actually involved with my first Kickstarter project right now, but I didn't initiate it. Somebody else initiated it to fund me as the composer, so that wasn't something I started. But and it's a very important project, so I don't mean to kind of gloss over it. But I've done something. I don't know if I invented this term. Somebody has told me I have, but maybe somebody else came up with it first. But I've done a lot of what I call micro commissions. And that started with, I give a scholarship every year. Usually it ends up being to a trumpet player because that's something that's very important to me. But I like the idea of getting a lot of people involved at minimal cost to them. And so I've done projects where I will let the trumpet world know, for example, that I'd love to write a piece and it'll cost you all $10, but let's get 100 of you together. And then you'll all get the piece for $10, but then I'll give that money away to a scholarship student, whether it's a college kid or high school kid or something. And I've done that 4 or 5 times. And I've raised up to $3,500 sometimes, and I give it away as a scholarship. But I just love the idea of getting a bunch of people together. It doesn't cost them a lot of money. And then we give the money away and we all feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. So that's become important to me. I do that every year. And on occasion, just with that whole micro commission thing, I've done that with pieces that aren't scholarships as well, but it's, I wrote the trombone concerto for Joe Alessi, and with him and me together, we got 55 people to help fund it. It's 55 people who don't have to pay a lot, but they all get a trombone concerto, and it's just kind of a way of reaching a lot of people. That's, it's kind of a consortium on a very micro level, right?
Sure.
Get 100 people together and they all get something for a little cost.
You got to be good at, and even just the the story that the storyline that you're telling there in terms of the, the scholarship or Joe Alessi. I mean, that's interesting. You know, if I was a trombone player, I'd be like, wait a minute, I can help make a trombone concerto for Joe Alessi happen. That's a great hook. You know, not in a dirty trying to sell too much car to somebody kind of a way. You know, but just in a very genuine way. But you got to be good at networking, which you obviously are, to be able to pull off any of that stuff, you know, in terms of getting large numbers of people. Well, I know 55 people isn't a lot, but kind of is a lot of people to actually get them all to follow through and to hit send on the PayPal, whatever, you know.
Right. And, you know, all you do is ask. Everybody, they can say no, you know. And
Sure.
so I just say, here's the project. Here's what I'm hoping to do. Love to have you involved with it. If not, maybe next time. You know, it's not, you don't have to be pushy about it. You just let them know that this is what we're doing. If it works out, great. If not, that's fine too. You know?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I've done that with a horn piece. I've done that with a bassoon piece. I'm doing it with a clarinet sonata. And it's literally just asking people if they want to be involved. And if not, that's fine. We can still be friends.
Wow, that's great. I'm glad I asked that question because that's interesting that you haven't spearheaded yourself on one of the major platforms, and yet that's exactly the spirit of it is that you're just kind of you're self-publishing the crowdfunding, so if you will, so which is kind of similar to the route that your music has taken for the most part at this point. So, is there anything else that I've forgotten?
Yeah, but I'll tell you in a week. You know,
did your daughter win her field hockey game tonight?
It was intra squad game. So
everyone wins.
Everyone wins. Yeah,
that's the problem with kids today. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Yeah. No, they have a real game tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. But,
Great. And where can people find you on Twitter?
I think that it's Composer Jim, actually.
Yep, that's right.
I think my Twitter handle is Composer Jim, yeah.
And you have a Facebook page as well?
I have a Facebook page, which is James Stephenson Composer. And I don't do as much on that, to be honest, as I do with my personal page, just because, again, I like to be personal with everybody. So
sure.
You can find me at Jim Stephenson if you want. Either one is fine. And StevensonMusic.com if you want to point people in that direction. There's a lot of listening links there. You can hear a lot of my music.
There's good stuff, and there's more info about the trumpet scholarship as well.
That's right. Oh. That's right. That one's closing up in a week. I'll be wrapping that one up and awarding a scholarship in September at some point.
Cool.
So
great.
Yeah, just love sharing my music and love having a chance to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
You know, it's not a blind phone call. It's the real deal, sort of. Skype.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we both look so good. You know, it's definitely.
I have to say, I'm not just saying this. You actually look younger, and that's not fair. How old is your child?
He is 16 months.
See, now when my daughter was 16 months, I was pulling my hair out. So how do you actually look younger?
Well, I go to the spa every morning, so no, not at all. I think that you're not even 50 yet, but I think your eyesight's going. Actually, I think that's
Let me turn the brightness up. Oh, there you are.
I was awake with him from 4:45 to 5:45 last night when he was just like, he was mad, and I was explaining to him that he was tired and that he just needed to go to sleep, and that made him mad. So he just lather, rinse, repeat. Yeah, it was just that was a really fun hour. So, for any of you thinking about having children, the cliche that it's the greatest thing ever is absolutely true for me. But if you're not positive that you want to have kids, you wait until you're positive, whether that's tomorrow, next week, or in 5 years. Yeah, it's like, it can be hard work. So, and I've got an easy one. And you have 4, is that right?
With my first daughter, you just mentioned being up. I was up from 2:30 till 4:30 every single night for the first year and a half of her life.
And you had another one? What's wrong with you?
3 more after that. Yeah. She was, and we've learned now that she was probably one of those colicky babies.
Right.
You know? But we just figured that that's the way it was for everybody. That's what we figured. And then we had our second child, and she slept through the night like from day one.
Wow.
We're like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Well, I could edit all of this out at the end here, but I think that this is important information. We've got a lot of I've got a lot of people that are in their like early to mid 20s who are kind of trying to light the music world on fire. They need to hear this kind of stuff. So, yeah,
it's your eyes open quickly when you have kids. Like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. I had no idea. And then, yeah, and now I'm sending one to college, and well, that one, the oldest, and so I got to keep writing music for a while.
Yeah.
I've got kids going to college. No, it's all great. It's absolutely. I mean, it's a joy. You know it.
Yep, I do. Well, thank you so much for your time.
This was a blast. I wish we had 2 more hours.
Yeah, man. Well, that wraps another episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician. You've been listening to The Entrepreneurial Musician with Andrew Hitz on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter and find my blog at andrewhitz.com. You can also find me at facebook.com/Hitztuba, and I'm at Hitztuba on Twitter. The Entrepreneurial Musician is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producer is Andrew Hitz. The theme music was performed by Ben Barron, Rich Kelly, Daniel Lapel, and Andrew Hitz. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.